Rancher bought a ghost town for $100 and found a family still living there. The desert was the kind of quiet that felt like it could swallow a man whole. No wind, no birds, just the crunch of boots over dry earth. Eli Ward stepped down from his old pickup, his shadow stretching long across the cracked road. The sun was only a pale disk in the morning haze, but the heat was already pressing against him. The wooden sign overhead still read, Silverton. The letters faded, one corner hanging by a rusted nail. He'd bought the place for $100, not because he needed it, not because it was worth anything, but because no one else wanted it. The town looked dead. Storefront windows were broken. A saloon door leaned on one hinge. Dust had claimed everything, softening edges, muting colors. A church steeple stood crooked, pointing toward nothing. Eli walked slow, each step echoing like it didn't belong. He had the papers folded in his jacket pocket, but it didn't feel like he'd bought anything real, more like he'd purchased a memory someone had given up on. Halfway down the main street he stopped. Something moved. It wasn't the wind. There was none. It wasn't an animal. Too slow, too deliberate. From the shadow of the old mercantile, a boy appeared, barefoot, thin. His hair was long and matted, his eyes sharp but tired. He didn't speak, just stood there, watching Eli like a stray dog deciding whether to run. Eli froze, unsure if he should wave, speak, or keep walking. Then a sound, faint but unmistakable, came from behind the boy, a baby crying. Eli's chest tightened, his eyes lifted toward the store's doorway, and there she was, a woman in her mid-30s, skin sunburned, hair pulled back in a loose braid. She held the crying child close, one arm wrapped like a shield. Her dress was torn at the hem, her feet bare. They weren't ghosts. They weren't squatters passing through. They belonged here. Eli took one step toward them, and the boy instantly moved between him and the woman, jaw set, fists clenched, though he couldn't have been older than 12. No one spoke. The silence was thick, heavy, the kind that said too much. Eli raised his hands slightly, not in surrender, but in quiet assurance. He had bought an empty town, but it wasn't empty at all. The boy didn't blink. His bare feet were planted firm in the dust, like he'd been standing guard for years. Eli let the moment breathe, then knelt so he wasn't towering over him. "You folks been here long?" His voice came out rough, unused to conversation. No answer. The woman's eyes darted to the road, the buildings, the empty horizon, anywhere but at him. Her grip on the baby tightened until the child's crying softened into small, hiccuping gasps. Eli could feel the heat rising in his chest, not from the sun, but from something old, something buried. He'd seen this before. Not here, not in a ghost town, but in a kitchen with peeling wallpaper, the smell of whiskey in the air, his own mother clutching his sister just like that, jaw set, eyes tired, body half turned toward the door in case they had to run. The boy's shoulders shifted, a small movement, but Eli caught it. Readiness. This wasn't shyness. This was defense. "You got a name, kid?" Eli asked quietly. Still nothing. A dry gust rolled down the street, dragging a tumble of paper and grit. It brushed past Eli, but the boy didn't flinch. The woman took a step back into the shadow of the mercantile, and the baby's small hand reached up, clutching at her collar. Eli straightened, looking at the hollow windows above them. This building hadn't seen a paying customer in decades. No running water, no working power, no storehouse. They shouldn't be here. But they were. He should have walked away. It wasn't his business. The papers in his pocket didn't come with people attached, and people meant trouble, the kind that didn't stay on your doorstep. Still, something in him tightened at the thought of leaving them. The woman's silence wasn't distrust. It was something harder, resignation. Like she knew he could leave at any moment, and life would go on exactly as it had, empty, dangerous, hopeless. A flicker of memory cut through him. His sister, Lila, 13 years old, holding a cracked coffee cup with both hands, whispering to him not to talk back, not to draw attention. The way her voice had carried a weight far older than her years. The boy's eyes held the same weight. Eli stepped closer. "You eat today?" The boy's mouth tightened. The woman glanced at him, just for a heartbeat, then back at Eli. She didn't answer, but she didn't pull the boy inside either. It was enough. Eli sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. He wasn't built for this. He'd spent years keeping to himself, running cattle, fixing fences, sleeping under a roof that only echoed his own footsteps. People complicated things, but the quiet out here wasn't just loneliness anymore. It was something heavier, the kind that could bury you if no one reached in. He looked at the woman, then at the boy. "I'm not here to take anything from you," he said. "But if you stay out here alone, you won't make it through the winter." The woman's jaw tightened, but her eyes softened. Barely. Eli didn't wait for her to invite him. He just said, "I'll bring food." It wasn't a promise he wanted to make, but it was one he couldn't walk away from. Eli came back the next day with a burlap sack slung over his shoulder. Bread, canned beans, a slab of salt pork wrapped in paper. The boy was outside, sitting cross-legged in the dust, whittling a stick with a dull knife. He didn't look up when Eli approached, but his grip on the knife tightened. "Brought something for you," Eli said. The boy didn't answer, but the woman stepped out from the mercantile's doorway. She looked more tired than yesterday, like she hadn't slept. The baby's head rested on her shoulder, eyes half closed. Eli handed her the sack. She hesitated, eyes flicking toward the far end of the street, the way you look when you expect someone to appear. That's when Eli noticed the fresh tire tracks in the dirt road. Wide tread. Heavy truck. They weren't there yesterday. "Somebody else been here?" he asked. Her lips pressed into a thin line. The boy stopped carving. Eli knew the look. Someone's shadow still hung over them. She finally spoke, voice quiet, but edged with fear. "They'll be back." "Who?" She shifted the baby in her arms, looking past him toward the empty road. "Men who used to run the mine. Not owners. Muscle. They think we owe them." Eli frowned. The mine had shut down nearly 20 years ago. Whoever was left now was just scavenging scraps. "They say this is their land," she went on. "Say my husband made promises. Where's your husband now?" Her eyes darkened. She didn't answer, but the boy's jaw clenched hard enough to make the truth clear. Eli exhaled slowly. "How many of them?" "3, sometimes 4. The baby whimpered, sensing the tension. He could see it now. The reason they stayed in a dead town. No law out here. No neighbors. No one to see what was happening. Eli ran a hand over his beard, weighing the situation. He'd dealt with men like that before. During his years working security on oil fields, they didn't just take what they wanted. They made sure you couldn't stand after. "When are they coming back?" The woman's voice was barely above a whisper. "Soon. Maybe today." A sharp sound cut through the still air. The distant rumble of an engine. It was faint, but in a place this quiet, it might as well have been thunder. The boy stood, knife still in hand. The woman's grip tightened on the baby. Eli looked toward the horizon. A plume of dust was rising beyond the low hills. He didn't know why he cared. This wasn't his fight. He could walk away, drive home, pretend he never saw them, but the weight in his chest told him he wouldn't. "Get inside," he said, voice low but firm. The boy didn't move. His chin lifted in defiance, the same way Eli remembered standing when his own father came home drunk. That stubborn, dangerous bravery that didn't yet know fear could get you killed. Eli stepped closer, putting a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Not this time," he said. "Go." The engine was louder now, the dust plume closer. By the time the boy and woman slipped inside the mercantile, Eli was already stepping back into the street, the sun glaring off the barrels of the truck as it rounded the bend. He had no plan, only the certainty that whatever happened next, walking away was no longer an option. The truck didn't stop that day. It slowed, circled, then rolled on, maybe to remind them it could come back any time. By dusk, the heat had eased, and Eli sat on the mercantile's porch steps with the boy beside him. The baby was asleep inside, the woman tending a small fire in a dented metal barrel. Eli handed the boy a piece of jerky. The kid took it without thanks, chewing slow, eyes fixed on the horizon like he was still waiting for the sound of an engine. "You know how to shoot?" Eli asked. The boy's eyes flicked toward him, then away. A small shake of the head. Eli reached for the rifle leaning against the porch post. It wasn't fancy, just an old lever action that had seen better days. He laid it across his knees, running a cloth over the barrel. "Not about killing," Eli said. "It's about not being helpless." The boy didn't answer. But when Eli stood and walked toward the open stretch behind the church, the boy followed. They set up bottles on a fence post. Eli showed him how to hold the rifle, how to lean into the stock so it wouldn't kick him in the shoulder. The boy's first shot missed by 10 feet. Eli didn't laugh. "Again," he said. By the fourth shot, the bottle shattered. The boy's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but something lighter than the weight he'd been carrying. Later, they sat by the fire with the woman. She'd opened one of the cans Eli had brought, mixing beans with chopped onion in a dented pot. The smell filled the empty street, warm and homely against the cool night air. Eli rolled up his sleeve to stir the pot, and the firelight caught the pale scar across his forearm. The boy noticed. "What happened?" he asked quietly. The first words Eli had heard from him. Eli didn't look up. "Someone I trusted thought I wouldn't fight back." The boy's gaze lingered, like he understood more than his age should allow. The woman didn't speak, but Eli saw her eyes flicker to the bruise on her own arm, half hidden by her sleeve. They ate in silence. The fire cracked softly. Somewhere far off, a coyote called into the night. After the plates were scraped clean, Eli stayed a while longer, not ready to leave. The baby stirred, and the woman shifted to rock her gently. The boy sat closer to Eli now, knees drawn to his chest. "You gonna come back tomorrow?" the boy asked, his voice almost casual. Eli didn't answer right away. The question was simple, but the weight in it wasn't. "Yeah," he said finally. "I'll be here." For a moment, the air between them felt almost like peace. The kind of peace that's rare when you know trouble's coming. Fragile, but enough to keep breathing. The truck came back at dawn. Its engine shattered the stillness like a warning shot. Eli was already outside, hat low over his brow, rifle in hand. The boy stood at the mercantile's doorway, his small frame rigid, while the woman stayed inside with the baby. The truck rolled to a stop in the middle of the street. 3 men climbed out. All wore the same kind of smirk, the kind that came from knowing no one out here would stop them. The tallest stepped forward. His beard was streaked with grey, his jacket worn but expensive. "You Eli Ward?" Eli didn't answer. "This is our place," the man went on. "Woman inside owes us. Husband took what wasn't his." Eli shifted the rifle slightly, just enough to make the man notice. "She doesn't owe you a damn thing." The man's grin widened. "She owe me, or she pay with that boy." The boy's knuckles went white on the doorframe. Eli stepped between them, planting himself square in the street. "Not gonna happen." The man's eyes narrowed. "You own this place now? Means her debt's yours too." The second man, wiry, twitchy, moved toward the mercantile. Eli raised the rifle, the barrel steady despite the thud in his chest. "Take another step," Eli said, "and I drop you where you stand." The air went still. Even the truck's idle seemed to quiet. The tall man chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "You think you can scare me, rancher? I've buried better men for less." Eli's voice stayed calm. "Then you've been digging in the wrong dirt." The wiry man stopped, his eyes darting between Eli and the boy. That's when Eli saw it. The boy's knife, clenched tight at his side. His whole body shook, but his stance was ready. "Put it away, kid," Eli murmured, without turning. But the boy didn't. The tall man caught it too. "Got some fight in him, huh? Just like his old man." Eli froze. "What did you just say?" The man's grin returned, sharper now. "That boy ain't hers. Belonged to the man who crossed us. Guess she figured taking him along would make her look pitiful enough to be spared." The words hit harder than any bullet. Eli glanced at the woman, her face pale, lips trembling, but she didn't deny it. The boy's eyes darted between them, confusion and betrayal tightening his features. The tall man took a step closer. "Walk away, Ward. You don't know the whole story." Eli gripped the rifle tighter. Maybe the man was right. Maybe he didn't know everything. But he knew enough. He knew the boy had stood between him and the woman that first day. He knew they'd eaten together, shared silence, shared scars. And he knew walking away would finish them. The rifle came up. "You come for them," Eli said. "You go through me." The tall man's smirk faltered. The wiry one's hand twitched toward his waistband. Eli didn't wait. One shot cracked the air, kicking dust at the wiry man's boots. The baby started crying inside. The boy flinched but didn't move. The 3 men hesitated, just long enough to know Eli meant it. Then slowly they backed toward the truck. "This ain't over," the tall man said. "Then you better bring more men," Eli replied. The truck roared off, leaving dust and silence behind. Eli lowered the rifle, his breath heavy. He'd bought a ghost town. Now he'd just declared war for it. The echo of the truck's engine faded into the hills, leaving the town in a kind of silence that felt wrong. Not peaceful, not safe, just empty, like the air had been punched out of it. Eli stood in the middle of the street, rifle still in hand, watching the dust settle. His shoulders ached from tension. Sweat slid down the side of his neck, cold now that the morning heat had eased. Behind him, the mercantile door creaked open. The boy stepped out first, knife still clutched, eyes darting to the road as if the truck might come roaring back any second. "They're gone," Eli said. The boy didn't answer. The woman appeared in the doorway, the baby tucked against her chest. Her face was unreadable, but her hands trembled slightly. Eli lowered the rifle, leaning it against the porch rail. "They'll be back," he said. She nodded once. "I know." For a while no one spoke. The wind returned in small breaths, carrying the faint smell of the fire barrel from last night. Eli looked at the boy. "You need to pack." The boy frowned. "We're leaving?" Eli didn't answer right away. He glanced at the woman, saw the hesitation in her eyes. She'd lived here long enough to know the cost of running and the cost of staying. "They won't stop," Eli said finally. "Not until they take everything." The boy's jaw tightened. "Then we don't let them." It was stubbornness, courage, maybe both. Eli saw himself in that look, the same defiance that had nearly gotten him killed more than once. He crouched, so he was eye level with the boy. "You fight when there's a chance to win. You run when there isn't. That's how you stay alive." The boy stared at him for a long moment, then gave a small, reluctant nod. They worked in silence. The woman gathered what little food they had left. Eli found an old canvas pack and stuffed it with blankets, water, the few cans that would last. The boy slipped the knife into his belt without Eli telling him to. By the time the sun touched the tops of the hills, they were ready. Eli loaded them into his truck. The woman in the passenger seat, the boy in the back with the baby. The mercantile stood behind them, windows catching the light one last time. It looked less like a home now and more like a shell. As Eli turned the key, the boy spoke quietly from the back. "You think they'll find us?" Eli kept his eyes on the road ahead. "Maybe, but they won't find us the same way." They drove in silence. The road stretched out like a ribbon of dust, the horizon swallowing the town until it was just another shadow in the distance. The woman glanced at Eli once, her lips parting like she might speak, but she didn't. Instead, she reached into the back, her fingers brushing the boy's hand. He didn't pull away. Eli's grip tightened on the wheel. He'd walked into a ghost town expecting nothing but ruin. Now, he was leaving with something he hadn't planned for. Responsibility. And maybe, if they survived this, something close to family. 2 months passed before Eli saw the ghost town again. From the ridge, it looked smaller than he remembered. Its buildings crouched under the weight of dust and sun. No movement. No tracks on the road in. Just silence, the kind that swallows whatever came before. They'd been living in a small cabin Eli owned, miles from any main road. No one had found them. Not yet. Life there was simple, almost bare. The woman, Sarah, he'd learned, mended old clothes with steady hands. The boy, Daniel, took to ranch chores like he'd been born to them. The baby, a girl named Ruth, had learned to grip Eli's finger like she owned it. They didn't talk much about that morning in Silverton. Some things were better left in the quiet, but it lingered between them, a shared understanding that they were bound now, not by blood, but by survival. Daniel had grown in those weeks. Not taller, maybe, but different. He carried himself like someone who knew his place in the world wasn't guaranteed, but was worth fighting for. He could shoot straight now, split wood in 2 clean strokes, ride the bay mare without gripping the saddle horn. Sarah smiled more. Not often, not wide, but enough to make Eli notice the change. One evening, as the sun sank low, they sat on the porch, dinner plates resting on their knees. Ruth gurgled in Sarah's lap. Daniel leaned against the railing, watching the horizon. "They'll come someday," Daniel said quietly. Eli didn't lie. "Maybe." Daniel looked at him, eyes steady. "We'll be ready." Something in Eli eased at that. Not because he believed they'd be safe forever, but because he knew the boy wasn't helpless anymore. When the first frost came, Eli rode back to Silverton alone. The place was colder than he remembered. He walked the empty street, past the church, past the mercantile. The porch steps still bore the scuff marks from his boots that morning. He left a single thing behind, a tin of beans, set carefully on the mercantile step. Not as an offering, not as bait, just a mark, in case anyone else wandered in and found themselves as empty as the town. Back at the cabin, Sarah was rocking Ruth, and Daniel was stacking firewood. The light from the window spilled out into the cold night, warm and steady. Eli paused before stepping inside, the smell of stew drifting through the door. For a long time, he'd thought of himself as the last man in his own story. Now, maybe, he wasn't alone anymore. The wind moved through the trees, low and